Modern trade operates on a specific assumption that strict intellectual property rights are the primary mechanism driving industrial expansion. In this framework, legal protection for ideas is viewed as the essential requirement for a nation to move from poverty to high-tech prosperity. Macroeconomic data suggests a more complicated reality. Strengthening these legal protections fails to produce a consistent upward trajectory of wealth across different economies. Applying the exact same patent and copyright standards can trigger an innovation boom in one country while stalling industrial progress in another. We can explain this variation by mapping legal mechanisms against empirical trade data. The resulting model shows that the economic impact of intellectual property follows a U-shaped curve determined by a nation's existing level of development. Understanding this curve determines whether a developing nation can successfully integrate into the global trade landscape or if it will remain trapped in a cycle of industrial stagnation. Tracing this curve begins with the law's treatment of the mind. Intellectual property classifies intangible assets, like software code and chemical formulas, or mechanical designs, as private property. These assets are inherently non-rivalrous. One person's use of an idea does not prevent another's, meaning an invention can be copied infinitely at near zero marginal cost. Left unregulated, this infinite supply would drive the market price of an idea to zero. Legal systems create a bundle of rights, making ideas excludable, allowing creators to charge for access. Patents provide the most rigid barrier, a strict 20-year manufacturing monopoly. Copyrights protect tangible expressions for life plus 60 years, while trademarks secure brand identity through 10-year renewable terms. Governments utilize these legal fences as deliberate market distortions, engineering artificial scarcity to transform intangible thoughts into tradable economic assets. In a perfectly competitive market, price settles where supply and demand intersect, matching the marginal cost. But high-tech innovation requires substantial upfront investment. Pricing a product at manufacturing cost will never recoup that initial capital. The patent solves this by temporarily suspending competition. This legally mandated monopoly shifts the supply curve, forcing the market toward a higher price point. This gap between the monopoly price and production cost represents the profit margin, justifying original R&D risks. Shifting the price upward inevitably reduces consumer access, as fewer people can afford the good at its artificial monopoly rate. This creates dead weight loss. It is the quantifiable loss in economic efficiency occurring when consumers are priced out of a market that would be accessible under normal competition. IP law accepts this immediate loss in consumer welfare as a calculated trade for the long-term technological progress the monopoly incentive is expected to produce. The central question for policymakers is whether these individual monopolies actually aggregate into measurable growth for a national economy. Researchers studying this relationship have found that the effectiveness of IP protection is not uniform. The data shows that a nation's pre-existing wealth determines whether strict patent laws accelerate or hinder its overall development. To identify the variables at play, economists analyze cross-sectional data across high, middle, and low-income nations. Mapping this data reveals the specific mechanics that determine how innovation actually translates into GDP. We can plot these findings on a coordinate plane, with national income on the horizontal axis and IP impact on the vertical. For high-income nations, the data confirms a strong positive correlation. Stricter laws lead directly to higher growth. Advanced economies already possess the necessary R&D infrastructure. Their firms can immediately utilize patent protections to monetize new inventions and reinvest those profits. This cycle drives significant improvements in total factor productivity, moving the entire economy forward. The data also shows a strong positive impact at the opposite end of the spectrum, the low-income nations. These nations often lack domestic R&D capacity and don't produce patentable inventions. Yet the data shows their economic growth accelerating alongside stricter IP enforcement. This growth is driven by foreign direct investment. By enforcing strict IP laws, low-income nations provide a legal guarantee to foreign corporations that their proprietary technologies will not be pirated. This robust legal security encourages multinational firms to build local factories, hire local workers, and transfer valuable industrial knowledge across borders. At these two extremes, strict intellectual property rights serve as effective drivers of growth, securing domestic invention at the high end while attracting external capital at the low end. The middle-income nations tell a different story, forming the bottom of the U-curve. In these economies, strong IP protection has been empirically shown to have a negative impact on economic growth. Middle-tier economies typically grow through a catching-up phase. They build their industrial base by imitating and manufacturing established foreign technologies. Enforcing strict patent laws during this phase raises the legal and financial costs of reverse engineering. This blocks the primary channel of development for these nations before their domestic R&D sectors are mature enough to compete through original invention. History shows that many industrial powers expanded their manufacturing capacity through periods of rapid technological adoption and imitation. For nations in this transitional stage, a rigid IP regime creates a significant barrier to entry, locking them in the trough of the U-curve and stalling industrial evolution. This economic reality faces a significant challenge from the current structure of international trade. The World Trade Organization manages the TRIPS Agreement, which establishes the global baseline for intellectual property law. TRIPS requires all member nations to adopt nearly identical minimum IP standards, regardless of their current level of economic development. This forced standardization places a disproportionate burden on middle-tier economies, situated at the bottom of the U-curve. Global institutions are now tasked with managing the friction created by these standardized rules as they interact with diverse national needs. Without flexibility, a universal IP regime threatens to stall the progress of the very nations it was ostensibly designed to help. The paradox of the U-curve suggests that an effective IP system must include functional release valves. Article 31 of the TRIPS Agreement provides one such mechanism: compulsory licensing. This provision allows a sovereign government to override a patent, authorizing domestic firms to produce a protected product without the owner's consent. The use of this power is strictly limited to cases of national emergency, public health crises, or to remedy anti-competitive market behavior. The responsibility for balancing these private monopolies against the public welfare rests with a nation's domestic judicial system. Effective intellectual property policy functions as a sensitive lever, requiring constant calibration to match a nation's specific stage of industrial evolution.